Welcome to the 12th South-South Forum on Sustainability. This year, the main theme is Green and Sustainability. And I'm Jadi Situi, and I'm an Associate Professor of Southwest University in Chongqing, mainland China. And I'm also one of the founding member of the Global University for Sustainability. And this session is about the international situation and how we develop a perspective from green and sustainability. And I would like to introduce the moderator of this section, Ashley William George DAYMAN. He is an Australian lawyer, and he also served as editor of the Global University for Sustainability Political Economy book series. And his research interest is about financial economic history, indigenous ecology, and community development. So now I pass it to Ashley. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this next session of the 2025 South-South International Conference on Sustainability. The theme of this session is the international situation and trends from a green perspective. Our first speaker is Michael Hudson. Michael is the president of the Institute for the Study of Long-Term Economic Trends and a professor of economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. He is the author of numerous books, including Super-Imperialism and the Destiny of Civilization, and he will be soon publishing his next book, A Political History of the West's Financial Takeoff from the Crusades to World War I. So, Michael, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Ashley. I'm so glad to be here. I had not actually thought of talking about the green politics and global warming. As an economic historian, I want to point out, though, that the decisive role of climate change throughout history has been the key. The collapse of the great civilizations, the migration movements in history have all been triggered by climate change. Around 1800 BC, the Indus civilization was the largest and most geographically widespread Bronze Age civilization. It collapsed over a period of time, just a few centuries, opening the door for the Indo-European speakers to come in and take over the Indian subcontinent. And at least they absorbed some of that great civilization's practices. In Europe, the Bronze Age came to an end in 1200 BC. The whole civilization, the whole economic takeoff of civilization had occurred in the Middle East. All this came to an end in the Eastern Mediterranean around 1200 BC because of bad weather. The palaces of Greece had used Linear B, the first syllabic writing. All that disappeared. The populations shrank drastically. Their life was decentralized. There was no longer any kingship or coordination. And populations moved from one place, just one territory to another, just huge movements, all because of the climate change. And weather was part of the cosmology of understanding the world at that time, including economic and agriculture relationships. Droughts and water levels were so important that they led to the flowering of scientific research in correlating data to find out what goes together. The first real putting together of scientific analysis were the Babylonian grain price diaries that were kept around the 6th century BC. They looked at the water level in the Euphrates. They looked at astronomical phenomena, the conjunction of the planets. They looked at everything was all put together, trying to figure out what's the correlation. And the difference from today's world is that today's climate disaster is man-made, not external to man. And it's also, there's a product, it's the result of deliberate government policy in many quarters. And that's what I want to talk about today. The second difference is this time around, the climate crisis has led to an explosion of anti-science, just the opposite of antiquity. There's a denial that global warming is man-made and that it's being sponsored politically by the United States in order to promote the oil industry. And with the oil industry, it's a whole international economic control that goes with this industry. And to fight against solar energy, wind energy, and non-carbon emissions on the ground that this technology is held to benefit China and is against American foreign policy. So I'm going to focus my talk on this political setting. As I said, my field is economics and geopolitics, not global warming and the green economy. But it turns out that global warming and the extreme weather problems are largely a result of international politics. You all have heard warnings about how the world's carbon footprint is getting worse and worse and is nearing a tipping point. The really bad news is that this is unlikely to be stopped for a reason that scientists have not explained. U.S. foreign policy has been totally committed to worsening global warming, to increasing the carbon footprint, and to opposing regulations that would slow it down. This was first brought to my attention in 1975 when I was working at the Futures Institute, the Hudson Institute, and I was considered by that time a futurist more than an economist. My boss, Herman Kahn, told me that the Defense Department was looking at the issue of global warming. And we had a brief discussion about it as it pertained to American foreign policy. In America, that meant foreign policy is U.S. How is the world going to be controlled by the United States? How will the United States dominate its geopolitics? Well, the starting point was recognition that oil and coal and wood burning were the major culprits. Everybody knew that. Oil was the key to the U.S. foreign policy, however, and the Seven Sisters, the big 7 oil companies, controlled the Middle Eastern oil trade along with Britain and France. And that explains much of the Near Eastern politics today. Oil and gas and coal were the main sources of electricity, and electricity is the key to industrial productivity. So any U.S. cooperation with or opposition to international moves to limit global warming was thus deemed to be not in America's national interest. It recently has come to light in the last few weeks that oil companies did their own research into global warming. They recognized already 50 years ago that oil was largely responsible for global warming. What did they do? They organized and they financed a huge junk science campaign to deny that this was man-made, to deny that oil and carbon emissions had anything to do with this, and that the oil industry was in any way responsible because it was enormously profitable for the United States. Oil was the basis of America's balance of trade. It's the strength of the dollar, and most of all, the ability to turn off the electricity, to turn off oil and the power of countries that did not follow U.S. foreign policy. So oil became the key to American control of the world, and that meant keeping oil is the main source of energy, not solar power, not wind power, not alternatives to oil. And the result was that the oil industry and the United States government, people like Nordhaus, have sponsored a junk science in the right-wing circles, advocating government deregulation. Don't let government have any kind of regulatory power over any of this. So, as you know, the United States has withdrawn from the Paris Accords aimed at reducing carbon emissions. And in just the past few weeks, Donald Trump has slashed environmental regulation in the United States. He's no longer regulating emissions from coal-fired power plants. His motto has been drill, baby, drill, meaning drill more oil wells, make more oil, because oil continues to be the strong point of America's balance of payments. And Trump has just provided increased tax incentives to the oil industry and removed the tax subsidies for putting solar panels on the roofs of people's homes, especially in highly polluting areas. He's opened U.S. public land for oil drilling, especially in Alaska and the Arctic. So directly linked to oil's role in pollution is the role in plastics pollution. Just this week, a United Nations conference in Switzerland had 120 countries gave delegates trying to cope with the health problems and related environmental destruction that's caused by plastics that are made out of oil. And it turned out that already, again, many decades ago, the oil industry, the plastics industry realized that the recycling plastics doesn't work, that just dump them into the ocean, and you're now having the water supply of the oceans being polluted with microplastics. Almost all Americans have, and many foreigners have microplastics in their bodies and in the brain even. They found the microplastics are so small that they're everywhere. So the biological and the medical effect of microplastics are part of this carbon emissions, the anti-green policy. And I want to say something about this word green. It seems ironic that the party calling itself green in Germany is the most pro-war, pro-Cold War, anti-environmental policy in Europe. Annalena Baerbock, its head, was promoting the war and the NATO war against Russia. And she has just been, as leader of the advocates for global warming, for war, and pro the United States, she's just been appointed head of the United Nations General Assembly for its 80th session that begins this September. And her role is to prevent any move by the United Nations to coordinate efforts to stop global warming. And this shows the almost total stranglehold that the United States diplomats have achieved over the United Nations. So the United States, if the U.S. military were a country, the global carbon emissions by the military alone is the equivalent of the 29th largest country in the world. Missiles, bullets, bombs, aircraft carriers, the constant flow of aircraft, more bombs. All of this military spending is probably, of all the industries, this is the key to global warming. And as long as there's this, America is, and NATO, including Europe, are declaring war against the rest of the world if they do not follow American policy, including the anti-environment policy, the war is going to continue, and it will continue to accelerate global warming. So finally, there's this a rising demand for energy from artificial intelligence, from the computer industry, in its attempt to limit human intelligence to what the designers of the computer programs decide to organize in terms of garbage in, garbage out when it comes to trying to understand world affairs. So I guess to sum up what I'm saying, a recent commentator has pointed out that certain words are now banned from any request for funding from the United States government. They've research that includes words like climate, global warming, and also women, disabled, equity, inclusion, social justice, gender, diversity, racism. These are no longer funded by the public. But the key is if you're making any kind of a grant for research or development through your university, getting a government grant, or directly to a government agency, if you talk about climate and global warming, the grant is automatically rejected. Trump is blocking this, just as he's blocked wind power in the United States in the last week. He said the Trump administration has passed laws saying that the windmills that are creating wind power are a danger to low-flying aircraft, that just like birds have been killed flying into windmills, so might airplanes. They have to be situated way back from railroad tracks, from airports, from roads and highways. His idea is to prevent it entirely. And the reason is that most wind power, the blades for the windmills are made in China. And that's against America's interest. As I mentioned before, Trump has removed the tax subsidy for houses to provide their own electricity by putting solar panels on the roof, because the main producer of social panels and its technology is China. And so somehow the idea that advocacy of stopping global warming favors China, not the United States, is built into U.S. policy, and that means into United Nations policy and any of the international organizations that the United States has veto power in. That's why the United States has withdrawn from the Paris climate agreements, because it doesn't want to do anything. I'll close by just talking about my own position here in New York. Last week, I was without electricity for 3 days. No lights, no telephone, no television, no internet, no air conditioning, nothing. And that's because in the it began on Tuesday, a week ago, when the buildings I'm in part of New York City in Queens, and when the office buildings turned on their air conditioning before 9 o'clock in the morning so that the people in the office buildings would be cool, it overloaded the system. Con Ed, the electric utility here, has been turning down the voltage, and the turning down the voltage ended up causing a fire right on the corner of where I live. The transformers caught on fire and burned down. It took them a day to fix them. They turned on the power. My computer system was burned out by a power surge. And it turned out that once they turned on the power, the feeder cables all caught on fire and burned out. And we were without electricity. For the last week, I've had a diesel generator in front of the building, providing diesel electricity to power our building and the rest of the block. That's happening in New York itself. It's happening through much of the United States, and friends of mine in Europe say that, well, this is normal. Many European buildings now have diesel generators to cope with the blackouts of the electricity, and the demand for electricity and blackouts is going to become larger and larger as a result of global warming, leading buildings to turn on their air conditioners. Turning on the air conditioner to cope with the global warming is going to overload the system. The system will blow out, causing people to move to highly polluting and very noisy diesel fuels. This is the self-intensifying system. that's been put in motion. It's extreme weather, and that's going to be plaguing us for the foreseeable future until the rest of the world can isolate the United States and Europe and its support of the oil industry and carbon emissions as its official foreign policy. I have more to say that I can say later to elaborate all of these points, but this is the big picture that I see.
That was a round of applause. Our next speaker is Pedro Paez-Perez. Pedro is a former Minister of Economy of Ecuador, Professor at the Catholic University of Ecuador, and an independent economic analyst. Pedro.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and as Professor HUDSON presentation showed us in such a clear way, the crises that we are facing are really, really very complex, and there is a interlinking of the different stages of potential crisis that very easily get into positive feedback loops with very strong derivations. So it is important to have a language, it's important to have a theoretical framework to deal with it, to discuss it, and to have some solutions, political solutions, the mobilization of the peoples in the world in order to face the agenda of the speculative elite that is taking precisely the humankind towards this abyss. I don't know if you can see the presentation, the PPT. So we need to understand that which is the articulation of the different dynamics in the world. We have the humankind has become a geological force over the abiotic dynamics of the lithosphere. Matter has complicated through the millennia, through the millions of years, into biotic dynamics, and within the biotic dynamics had appeared the noosphere. That means the intentional planning of the world. And this is specifically this situation, some specific stage of the development of humankind that created this capital of sin. It's not humankind as itself, is not the species, the plague, as some positions in the even among the progressive forces has said, that have created the problem is the logic of capital, more so, is the logic of speculative capital that had created this very critical situation in which three main contradictory situations had impeded the possibility of reason of the interest of the humankind to deal with the problems. That means the fetishism, the imperialism, and the class conflict. These three main forces, of course, this is a simplification. These three main forces could lead to a situation in which humankind cannot have a rational solution of a rational undertaking in terms of policy, in terms of agency, in order to prevent the worst scenarios. In order to have some minimum level of hierarchy in the ontology of this crisis of civilization, we need to understand that the systemic determinants of the dynamics of the capitalist mode of production have created two main classes of limits, of contradictions. The ones are related to the internal limits, related to the trend to the fall of the rate of profit, overproduction, and anarchy in production, including waste. The second one is related to the human quality the agency and the limits of the ecology that Professor Hudson has mentioned. But that implies not humankind as a biological being, but as a cultural being, as the spirit of the humankind has been compressed by these distortions given by the logic, the fetishistic logic of capitalism, the creation of imperialism as a part of this fetish, and the dynamic of class struggle through these two levels, at the local level in terms of social formations, in terms of countries, and the clashes of empires. Then this determinant pole of the relationship given by the abiotic and biotic dynamics has to deal with the noetic dynamics in terms of the dominant dynamics. The dominant pole of the dialectic has created a specific orientation in the dynamics of the human agency, and the logic of capitalism has created new scientific and technological revolution. We are in the middle of a spree of innovation, of disruptive innovations, without a valley of diffusion, as in the previous Kondratiev cycles. Since the 60s, that means 6 decades of permanent innovations, of permanent disruptions that transformed not only the logic of capitalism, but also the institutional dynamics and the culture in order to prevent the situation. The specific place of domination of the whole process by capital comes from the refuge in terms of a very quick and liquid movement of the financial capital, some specific logic of financial capital due to speculation that could escape the sunk cost of the fixed capital, of fixed cost of machinery, of installations, of infrastructure, and to hovering over the financial markets of the world in order to catch the most juicy investments, short-term juicy investment in the middle of this permanent creative destruction. The new gravitation of the center of accumulation has turned from the logic of power in the North Atlantic and Caucasic part of humanity towards Asia and maybe the global South. And that has created a tremendous situation in terms of identity politics that could open the doors for a violent scenario. And finally, the peak of the commandant heights of the situation, the dominant pole within the dominant pole of the dialectics is not the accumulation in industrial capital anymore, but in terms of this losing, in this declining center of hegemony in the North Atlantic area, is the financial hypertrophy of the speculative system. For these different levels, these different stages of dynamics, we have different levels of transitional dynamics facing these challenges of interlocking crisis systems in terms of different levels of resiliency. The most important, we don't have time to go into the detail, but the most important point is that the critical transition, that means a very rapid possibility of sliding towards a crisis, a very violent crisis of the situation, is precisely in the monetary and financial hypertrophy, with the possibility of immediate and humongous impact over the other planes of contradictions or other planes of dynamics. In order to have a very quick situation, a framework to understand what is going on, we have to set up what implies our ecological niche as species in terms as subject, historical subject, as a species, as humankind. We need to understand the condition of the metabolic framework in terms of this access, time on one side, and free energy, because that gives us which is the level, which is the degree of maneuver that we have as a species to face the different challenges. We have, as any other species, a minimal biological situation in terms of this time devoted to reposition, including rest, and also a minimal consumption, with all type of consumption. Humankind is a spiritual being, and that includes the cultural, historical, accumulating demands in terms of these biological minimums, and that created a very constrained limit in terms of what can be tolerated by the masses, and what can be which are the conditions that could create a very critical collapse of the situation. So we understand the relationship between workers' resistance, that means the masses agreeing to participate in the system, in relationship with the cultural national collective well-being, which is the concept of collective well-being related to the conditions of exploitation. If the culture, the specific culture, pushes for material consumption, and that is precisely the road taken by the Occidental civilization, this structure of power that at least 5 centuries ago took over the world from the North Atlantic control of the situation, is related precisely to the obsession with material things, the realization of the culture and the consumption related to what is called the society of having, the property, the cosification, the reification of the society. That is contrary to millions of years of evolution, is the hominization of humankind, and the specific experiences of Homo sapiens in terms of the privilege of the spiritual part related to the management of time. That is very foreign to the Occidental, to the Western culture, but is very common in terms of the indigenous communities, in terms of the long traditions of the different horizons in Asia, China, India, Persia, but also in Africa, in different segments of Africa, and in some parts of the history of the Western civilization. So we have this distinction settled by Ferdinand Tunis, the difference between the Gesellschaft and the Gemeinschaft. That means the original primordial organic community of being versus the society of having that can become the society of appearing, the society of the spectacle that Guy Debord criticizes 60 years ago. So we need, it's not only a matter of economic policy, is not a matter of the economic institutions, the economic struggle against the imperialism, against the exploitation at the national and the international level, is also the challenges in the plane of the construction of what Che Guevara mentioned, el hombre nuevo, That means a new type of humankind with other type of culture, other type of conviviality, other type of relationship, other type of links that could create the possibilities of a sustainable future. It is possible to transform an economy, a society, pushing for higher and higher levels of consumption. We are in we have passed for the capitalism of the subsumption, the sublation of the productive process to the logic of capital, towards a sublation of the consumption process to the logic of capital. And that situation has created a very obsessive mentality, a very obsessive mind at the global level, linked to the equalization of consumerism as the basic measure of well-being. We need to transform this in another type of situation, pushing in the horizontal axis towards more time, the quality of the enjoyment of the quality of time and the quality of human links in terms of not only local but international links, culture, spiritual realization, self-realization, etc. And that defines different levels of political, of economic policy aims. For example, the reduction of the waste in terms of wars, in terms of unemployment, in terms of installed capacity wasted by the logic of capital, by the logic of monopoly capital, but also by the specific dynamics of monopolic speculative capital. The second one, the second segment of challenge for the alternative economic policies and for the diplomacy of the peoples in the world against the logic of the IMF and speculative capital worldwide is the distributive situation. That means the relationship between necessary production and reposition and the surplus product. And this relationship with the what I call the partie-maudit, it has some that means the cost shared of the production, the part of the potential product in terms of Swissi and Baran that can be recovered by the rationalization of production that has been increased precisely because of the crisis of capitalism and the specific dynamics of the hypertrophy of speculative capital, whose only possibility of survival today is related to an agenda of war and conflict, is only related to an agenda of even institutional destruction that could make centuries of capital, of the promise of capitalist modernity, totally dysfunctional. We need to transform this situation that had reduced the margin of possibilities of the species in terms of the tensions on the external limits related, for example, to the climate crisis that Professor HUDSON has mentioned. We need to transform it into another type of situation in which the culture of the humankind could open the doors for a new type of society, the return to the organic community of being in terms of the self-realization of people. We need to open the orientation of science and technology towards another type of goals, not related to the maximization of profits and the short-termism of the financial markets, of the speculative markets, towards important and immediate challenges of remediation, of climate and ecological remediation, If we devote forces all around the world towards these specific themes in terms of sustainability, but also in terms of the cure of important maladies like cancer, for example, instead of devoting forces and resources towards the armament career, of course, we can have a different metabolic framework in a manageable frame of time, no? And that can transform the current notion of economy related to the specific paid and monetized spheres of production, distribution, exchange, and consumption towards these other parts of the management of time related to the family labor, to the intimate work, and the political action. That means the recovery of political sovereignty by the peoples, because we are transforming the priorities of the society related to the management of time. And that implies in the short term, we are not taking this in terms of sequential goals. We are talking about the interlink of the different tasks, because we can create possibilities at the local level, as we intended some years ago in Latin America with the policy of el buen vivir, no? El summa causae. That implies the transformation of the culture, even within the framework of several degrees of dependency in the world system. We can create some spaces to transform the task of a new horizon of civilization related to this the subversion of these mechanisms of oppression, this mechanism of domination that created during these last 5 centuries, the conditions of subordination of the people, the dividing between the being zone, that means the male, white, European, neurotypic, heterosexual model of being, against the other part of the other type of human experience and human being that have been marginated. And this is part of the construction, the social construction of power in terms of center, semi-periphery, and periphery. And the construction of the world system has been created in a passive and an active mechanisms of subordination in order to transform the gradient of domination, of international domination, based upon the possibilities of international trade, the international division of labor, the unequal exchange, and the increasingly important role of finance and money in that situation. In order to subvert these mechanisms of domination, we need an insubordination process that could have different stages. The foundational part related to the spirit of the people, the political awareness, the ideological and the agenda of transformation. But then we need to pass towards the constituent part. That means the realization of red lines in terms of institutional achievements that could prevent the possibility of reversing, like what happened with the first pink wave in Latin America. And then the defense of the constituent, that means the defense of the already gained territory in terms of the transformation of the international system from this monopolic situation of the dollar dominance in the global markets and the tax havens, the hypertrophy of the financial derivatives, etc., towards a new financial architecture that could transform the current international hierarchy of money, the main space of policy agency on behalf of the Western oligarchy based upon the logic of speculative capital, towards a new financial architecture as the vehicle for a multipolar world, with a new type of banking for a new type of development, a new type of regional anti-imperialist reserve systems, and a new type of clearing mechanism that could start up a new type of relationships at the local level, at the regional level, at the national level, at the international level, as the vehicle for people's integration. Thank you.
Our third speaker is Hernan Vargas Perez. Hernan is Vice Rector at the National University for Communes in Venezuela and a member of the political coordination of the ALBA movement. Hernan.
Thank you very much for this great conference that we're holding here in Shangyou County, Jiangxi Province. Well, I'll go straight to it. Initially, I propose an abstract that I changed a little bit in order to fix to our discussions. It's, of course, a contribution from the Venezuelan process, but is fitted to the discussion of the international trends that we have right now. So what I'm trying to propose is that from the Venezuelan commune, we have some outlines, some references, some trends from the global south for a civilization alternative. So in order to put that, I will just summarize. I will not add to the context that put together Pedro Perez Paez and Michael Hudson. I just want to emphasize that we in Venezuela, and I also can talk about the different social movements that are connected in this building initiative of the ALBA as a project of articulation from the social movement, both in that regional level and also in Venezuela, have had a consensus during the last years that what we are living right now is a civilizational crisis. The Western model is in the clay. It's a model that only points to the reproduction of capital. And instead of reproduction of capital and different domination relations, it's giving a big threat into life. So what we're facing now, it's a contradiction between this modernity, this model of civilization from the West, and life. They are clashing at the time. So from Venezuela, we're discussing how what we build has to be an alternative. So what I will share with you is maybe one of the main ideas that Hugo Chavez proposed during this century, is that he proposed the idea of a socialism centered in territory, where the commune is the space in the grassroots that has to build a new system, a new reality of different ways of relationship. So he proposed that basically this has to be the space where you can build different ways of sociability, different forms of political relationship, different forms of economic reproduction, of planning, and a mode of production that can guarantee the living conditions for most of the working people. So from that point of view, we are developing like two aspects. This presentation is about 5 periods that has determined what we have been building during these 25 years, and then 7 results 5 periods and 7 results of this process. The first period that we are identifying here is the roots since 500 years ago with the colonization. It was the beginning of what Professor Iraida Vargas and Professor Mario Sanoja called the long march towards socialism, which is their thesis for Bolivarian socialism. So from the, oh, please excuse me if the Mandarin words are not right. I just put it there in order to facilitate a little the discussion. The second period is referred to the rebellion period. It was that time between the big social explosion in 1989 in Venezuela into the military and civil rebellion led by Hugo Chavez in 1992. The third period is the period of constituent power, was the moment of building a new constitution for the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. The fourth period is the period of display of this project of people's power, this what we call the explosion of people's power. And the fifth period is the deepening, they go deep in both the resistance and counteroffensive between 2013 until today, which is the years of blockade of international sanctions in Venezuela. So I will emphasize quickly. The first period is what I told you before, is that Iraida Vargas and Mario Sanoja proposed that in Venezuela, what we have, it's in the origins, is a communal society. The indigenous way of living, it was a model of civilization that with the time has been transforming, mixing with the different kind of struggles of the people. During 200 years ago, it was about mixing with the independence process. Then it was mixing with the Afro struggles. Then it was mixing with the peasant struggles, then with the workers and the student struggles. So what they face is that in the different times, this communal base has been transforming during our society. So they basically propose that the transition to socialism must emerge organically from the sustained territorial practices of popular power. Those territories where you have already this basis of communal ways of make politics, make economics, cultural ways that has been transforming with the time. So we rescue this thesis of a long march toward the communal society. Then the second period, it's after the fall of the wall in Berlin, when they say there is the end of history. In Latin America, a lot of people from the elites say that Venezuela was like some kind of little Switzerland, where was no class struggle, there was no problem, everything was fine, was a good development model. And then happened this. A lot of people go into the streets against the neoliberal reforms that they were proposing in the whole region, but specifically in Venezuela. A lot of people went to the street, a lot of people were killed, murdered by the army forces and the state forces. More than 3,000 people died, not official records till this day. But at this time, Hugo Chavez was leading both a civil and military movement, revolutionary movement that was discussing the kind of country that we have and the kind of country that we need.
Right.
And I want to rescue here that Clever Ramirez Rojas, one of the ideologists of the Bolivarian Revolution, proposed that this country that we need must to be a country with a communal state, a comunero state. And he says that this country has to be based in 3 ways of production. How to produce food, how to produce material ways of living, material conditions and spiritual conditions. Second, producing science, technology, all the knowledge that we need to produce in order to reproduce our conditions of life. And third, he says that we need to produce dignity, that we need to produce a model of democracy where the people, he is leading the transformations for society. So in this movement, in 1992, the Bolivarian movement plans proposed to the world, and that's registered in a book, which is called Documentary History of the 4th February of 1992, where they propose this thesis about producing food, science, and dignity as a model of a communal society. From that, Hugo Chavez went to jail, and after some years, he goes out to the bed. He continued the Bolivarian revolutionary movement, but then they discussed the necessity to dispute democratically this project that they have for the country. So the first thing that he proposed is that when he was elected, he will assemble a constituent process in the whole country to discuss a new constitution. What I want to emphasize here is the idea that this new constitution for the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela posts this in his 5th article. In the 5th article of our constitution says, sovereignty resides untransferably in the people, who exercise it by 2 ways: directly, as provided by this constitution and the law, and indirectly, by means of suffrage, through the organs that exercise public power. So at this moment, they said the people has the sovereignty, and it's not possible to transfer it. And you can exercise it indirectly when you vote to elect some representative, but you can exercise it directly. So this is an interesting issue because it proposed, they put together a contradiction that we have here in Latin America, that we have there in Latin America, as part of the Global South, where we said that we has this necessity. Most of the people in Latin America, in the closure of the 20th century, were mobilizing against neoliberalism. And after that, we have new governments, we have progressive governments, we have left governments. But one of the things that we started was a contradiction between being a subject of rights and being a political subject that exercise directly the power. So here in Venezuela, we have that contradiction put in our political constitution, and then I will tell you more about it. Our 4th period is the display of people's power. During these years, we start a process of organization of different kind. This Bolivarian constitution guarantees rights for health, for water, for education, for sport, cultural rights, land rights. But what has been a distinctive characteristic in Venezuela is that all those rights has been achieved by the meaning of the people's organization in different forms from community. So in that we call the communal way into socialism in Venezuela, in 2012, Hugo Chavez proposed to the country that the advance of socialism must be measured by its degree of social control and general self-management and a substantially democratic model of collective power. So he puts social control, self-management, and direct democracy. So those, for us, are the basis of the building of socialism. And then the fifth period is from 2013 till today. And it has been marked for the international sanctions. What we have here, it's a graphic of how has been moving the inner budget of Venezuela, the income, the national income by oil production in Venezuela. As you can see, in 2012, we have an income of $52 billion, $52 billion. And at the end of 2020, we have an income of only $600 million. So kind of 1% of what we had in 2012. So of course, it has a logical consequence. We have decreased dramatically our possibility to guarantee social investment in different aspects, in all the aspects that were guaranteed by our constitution. So that's the reason we call of a process of resistance, and after that, counteroffensive. In this process, one of the main key issues has been, on the one hand, political measures in order to stabilize the macroeconomic varieties. In a second level, process of subsidize the most basic things for population. In Venezuela, 6 million families has subsidies for the food, which is one of the most important issues for living. And of course, investment in different aspects. Maybe the most important things that I will mention later is how, besides this situation, we have been able to resist with people's organization in different ways. For example, during the COVID, the whole people's organization were basic, were fundamental in order to guarantee the prevention, both the prevention and the attention of the different cases of contagions. So contain the contagions, but also the treatment for everyone who needs it. These 5 periods with this thesis that I mentioned in each one of these periods has brought us to what I call 7 results of this process. What we have been living during these years, I summarize it here in 3 consequences and 7 consequences in the today's Venezuela. The first result is that we have, during this year, has built a trend into people's organization as a policy engine. What does it mean is that at this time in Venezuela, we have built a culture where for anything that we need to achieve, the organization of the population is the key issue. One important representation of this is that, for example, in Venezuela, we have 49,000 communal councils, which is the basic cell of organization in Venezuela. And that are part of 5,300 communes in the whole country, which mean a communal council and a commune. So these are a space of self-governance where the population defines a plan for transformation, a territorial plan, and then they select the people of the community that will be part of the different community committees that will be promoting different actions in order to solve the main problems of the community. This process has took to in the last years, we have in Venezuela 1.8 million of different, what we call vocerias. which I could translate as spokespersons. Not really that, because we think that is more about a logic of obedience power. Is more a power from below, is a power from the mandate. It's not the fetishism of power, it's more about the collective power, the collective mandate to a person that is part of different committees and has a commitment with the community. So we have 1.8 million of people that has been elected by his community in order to be a servant of the collective. Venezuela has 30 million population in totality. So 1.8 million are organized in this way. The second issue is about the collective planning as a mobilizing factor. What does it mean is that, for example, each of these communes in Venezuela built a communal plan in order to say, we need to do this with the water, we need to do this with the mobilizing, we need to do this with the energy, we need to do this with education, with health. They made a governance plan collectively. And then after that, that is what guides the different actions of the commune. And at the same time, in our country, last year, we discussed which should be the national government program. So in this discussion during the last year, we says, we need to transform economy, we need to transform the political system, we need to transform the social inequalities, we need to transform the cities, the model of urbanization that we have, we need to transform the model that we have of the ecological way, the model of relationship with nature. We need to guarantee security, and we need to guarantee a new world where we have multipolar relations and not an imperialism. So those 7 transformations were discussed in the whole country, and they participate in the whole process. 2.5 million people participates in 65,000 assemblies in the whole country. That's what I call as the collective planning as a mobilizing process, as a discussion process, and then organize a culture where the program is the leader of the community. What we define in order to have unity is a program that unifies the community. The third issue, the third result is a communal economy that has some trends, some dynamics that could be part of a new paradigm. In the last years, we have been building in Venezuela from the communes a collective trademark, Hecho en Comuna, which is a made in commune trademark that can be used by different producers, organized by 3 specific actions. Organizing the producers from below. In Venezuela, we don't call a lot about cooperativism, but when we see a cooperative in Brazil, for example, in MST, we see that basically we are going through the same effort, but with a different name. So the collective organization for planning and production is a key issue. Then the self-management of social property means of production is one of the key issues. How the organized producers can be able to self-manage means of production that could be part of the communal property regime. Because it's not possible in capitalism to have independency if you don't build alternative chains of production, non-dependent, where you have social property of the means of production. And the third issue in this aspect, in the economic aspect, is about the self-sufficiency as the pattern of regulation of the production, not the logic of the market, which is dysregulated, which is about producing without a logic this is about production to self-sustain the necessities of community. So it's about to sustain production, it's about to guarantee the necessities of living of the families, and it's also about to guarantee the contribution to the community necessities. The fourth result is experience in the self-management and self-government in a national scale reality. So in Venezuela, at this moment, since last year, Kinchi last year visited some of the popular national consultations that has started in Venezuela in the last year, where each commune, each one of the 5,000 communes discuss in assembly which are the main necessities. And after that, people vote. So we have a method where the commune discuss, the spokespersons discuss which are the priorities. And then most of the people goes and vote in order to decide which one are the projects that they will execute. So as a result of that, in the last 2 years, the communes in Venezuela has executed 19,500 projects in different aspects, which are equivalent to almost $200 million. As you can see in one of the previous slides, it's kind of the third part of what we have as national income in 2020. So it's about to put the income, the national income, in order to be directly executed by the self-government and the self-management communes. The fifth result is about communal democracy as a new paradigm. What I can tell you there is that in the last 2 years, the 5,300 communes has this process of assemblies in order to establish priorities. And then when they vote, we have had 5 national consultations since last year. In these 5 national consultations, in each one of them has voted between 2.5 million people and 404 million people. So we are talking about an important level of participation from below in the commune level. 6, the Bolivarian military doctrine. In Venezuela, we have around, in the last 25 years, Hugo Chavez, as I mentioned before, with the regrets, with the shame of that moment in 1989, where the army, the National Army, massacred the Bolivarian people, the Venezuelan people. He proposed the transformation in the army doctrine. And he proposed that we need to have a Bolivarian doctrine centered in sovereignty, in integral defense, and in support to society, social service as a duty of the Bolivarian army. So at this moment, we have not only the common army in the Navy and the airplane, in the Air Force, and in the National Guard, but also we have 5 million people's militia in the whole country. So people in the commune, which is part of the National Army, in order to guarantee, as I told you before, sovereignty, integral defense, and social justice. And at last, the 7th result that I can share with you of what I think could be a reference for the building of a new society in our global south is the social investment culture. In Venezuela, as I told you before, we have this big decrease in the national income, but not in one of those single years we have changed the rate of social investment. In Venezuela, at the moment, Bolivarian Revolution guarantees 75% of the income is directed to the social investment. for communes, for self-governance, but also for infrastructure and services and common rights. As an example, I can tell you that in the 20th century, we have an income of around $230 million per year. And the level of social investment at that time was about 40%. In the last 25 years, since 1999, Venezuela has had an income by taxes around $5 or $7 billion per year. And all the time, we have had a 76% of social investment in all these years. And that's part of a culture that has been generated. It's a people that doesn't believe in neoliberalism. It's a culture where we don't believe in the free market as the regulator of society. So those 7 issues is what I want to share with you as what we think is part of a common puzzle that we need to build in order to see what could be common trends in the global south that could be part of the building of a new society. The last thing that I want to mention is that the shirt that I have says National University of Communes, Universidad Nacional de las Comunas, which is an initiative recently created by the President of the Republic, where he says, in this moment of our history, we have the necessity to build a new society, to transform the society that we have into a different pattern than the West. So we need to build a communal society, an alternative socialism from the commune. And in that moment, he told us the National University of Communes has to be an instrument for that transformation. And the task that he has mentioned, he says, on the one hand, the first task of this university is guarantee what the Bolivarian revolutionary movement says in the 90s. We need to guarantee that the communes can produce food, can produce the science necessary, the technology, and also can produce the dignity for the people. So a new democratic model where they can guarantee a new society. And the second task that he proposed, he says, the university needs to guarantee that these people that at this moment is exercising a lot of different change from the territories has the necessary tools to put the planning, the dreaming that we have right now into reality, into actions to transform. So he says the programs, the careers in the university needs to be a bridge between the planning of the people in the commune and the transformative action in the territory. If you don't achieve that, you are not fulfilling the mission. So that's the commitment that we have right now, and that's the reason that I have this shirt over here. So thank you very much, and sorry for the delay.
Thank you, Hernan. Michael, so for your next 15 minutes, could you continue, please, with the further points that you wanted to make, and also provide any thoughts that you might have on Pedro's and Hernan's speeches, including perhaps on Pedro's remarks about the need for a new international monetary system. Over to you, Michael.
I can continue to make the points that I was going to make if I would have chosen to run over my time. I think that I mentioned that extreme weather is increasing the incidence of tornadoes and hurricanes. This causes the destruction of real estate. And that in turn is adding to the cost of owning a home or real estate, not only in the United States, but in the rest of the world. But I'm following things here. Rising insurance costs are making properties very hard to sell in Florida and in Midwestern cities known as Tornado Alley, where there's so many hurricanes. So you're having large swaths of the United States. People have homes, They owe mortgages on them. They have to pay. They cannot afford to pay the insurance, and they can't sell them because there's no market for people to buy a home where you not only have to pay the mortgage, but have to pay the enormous insurance costs. Donald Trump just came over today, stopped the studies by the Federal Emergency Management Association to forecast tornadoes. The DOGE tax cut, the cuts in government employment have cut the employment in weather forecasting, in any analysis, and the federal FEMA has stopped making projections of tornadoes and weather, making banks stop making mortgages in areas where it looks like there may be tornadoes and global warming and drought. So you have the United States closing its eyes to the extreme weather crisis that's occurring, and it's paralyzing the entire economy. This should be a warning to the rest of the world as to what happened when you close your eyes. And it looks like this is becoming the norm for much of the world throughout the United States. You have global warming raising water levels that is increasing the flooding, especially of places like Bangladesh and islands in the Indian Ocean and in the Pacific Ocean. Not to mention the beaches in Florida, the seacoasts of the entire world are going to be threatened by the rising sea levels as a result of the ice glaciers melting. Bangladesh's low-lying islands from the Indian Ocean all the way to the Pacific. You're threatened with a shrinkage of the landmass and even submersion of many areas. So I think these countries should look at the United States boycott of action to stop global warming as serious as a declaration of economic and geopolitical warfare, because that's how the US diplomats themselves look at it. How can they use global warming to increase their power over the rest of the world and use it to their advantage, not trying to cope with it. I also mentioned the use of computers. You're now having all over the world computers. First of all, there was a huge demand for computer energy to make Bitcoin, which is completely unnecessary. But you have in Iceland whole electric utilities, power utilities based on volcanic heat under the surface of Iceland to power computers solely designed to solve Bitcoin mathematics for this cryptocurrency. But now that you have artificial intelligence proliferating everywhere, especially by the American firms whose computer chips use maybe 10 times as much energy as the Chinese computer chips, you're having so much of, you're having the rest of the world, the whole world look like I described New York is happening. Power utilities are producing this energy that is used for artificial intelligence and for computers is going to require cutbacks in the voltage that they supply. It's going to lead to breakdowns. It's going and the United States is probably 10 years away from increasing power production. So there's no way that you can, in a short time span, create the power utilities to cope with the demands for computer usage of energy compared to home usage for appliances, for air conditioning, for industrial usage, and for corporate usage. So you're having an overload of the energy using systems, primarily in the United States, and throughout the world. That's leading to a very sharp increase in electric prices and hence in the cost of living. And that's going to squeeze the budgets for half of the American public has reported to poll takers that they have no savings available for an emergency, zero savings. They have no net worth. Their debts exceed the assets that they have. Well, it's been calculated in the last week that Donald Trump's tariffs have added about $2,400 annually to the budget of Americans. And so many Americans are living on the borderline of subsistence that they're going to have a cutback. When the increased cost of electricity, of heating their homes, of turning on the lights to read the newspaper, turning on the television or cable TV is taken into account, you're going to have a transformation not only of the way people live, but in the cost of living. And that means the cost that employers will have to pay their labor force in order to be employed to produce goods for export. So the United States opposition to coping with the global warming, the opposition of the Trump administration to to wind energy, to solar panel energy, to any non-oil, non-coal energy or non-nuclear energy is destroying the United States economy itself, from the housing sector to just the basic consumer budgets. You have international law is required to solve this. International law prevents governments from imposing cleanup costs or pollution taxes on the polluters that are mainly responsible for global warming. The International Investment Dispute Courts say that if a government imposes a new charge on foreign investors, such as you're going to have to pay them the cleanup costs when the oil spills occur, that they have to pay damages. The governments are fully responsible. Corporations, especially the oil industry, has been declared not liable for any of the pollution that it causes. And as you've seen in the United States with, I think, the Chevron case in Latin America, the lawyers suing these companies have been attacked legally and subject to prosecution. So we're in a new kind of war. We're in a war by the United States and its corporations and the government and the military against foreign attempts to stop global warming. And that, I think, should be the framework for any of these discussions about, well, how do we stop it? What's the solution? None of these can be implemented legally until you deal with the fact that the United States is opposing it. My colleague Steve Keen, and I doubt that Democratic pressure is going to have much effect. Steve Keen has taken the lead in criticizing the economics of Nordhaus and others that say global warming doesn't exist. It's just a fact of nature. I mentioned that there have been many global warming crises and droughts in the past civilization's history. Well, Nordhaus says, well, it's just happening again. It's not our fault, meaning it's not the oil industry's fault, and it's not the US government's fault in preventing any kind of environmental protection, but in fact, backing environmental destruction as a central piece of American foreign policy. That's the point that has to be emphasized. The major polluting companies really don't care. The corporate sector is basically a financial sector, and the time frame they have is only 3 months, or at most a whole year. What are our profits going to be in the whole year? They're willing to continue the pollution to continue the damage to the environment as long as they can take whatever they can, as long as they can, and then let the whole world fall apart in a vast hurricane or typhoon, a drought, let the populations be forced to migrate from one region to another, as occurred in the past. That's not their concern. They'll have taken all of their money and hope to move to New Zealand or someplace mountainous, someplace where they can be free of any responsibility for the problems that they've caused. I think the economic models that say, well, the magic of the marketplace is going to cure all of this, and if there's a problem that's disturbing economic balance, you can be sure that market forces are going to cure all of this. Well, market forces don't, especially if you prevent governments from shaping the market within which forces operate. If you don't let governments regulate and shape the market to levy a charge on carbon emissions by oil, gas, coal, and chopping down forests and burning wood, then that's not really market forces at all. That's a opposition to the whole civilized idea that governments should shape the economy to prevent individuals and individual greed and short-termism from destroying the environment in which the majority of people have to live. What's brought so many problems and poverty in its train is this philosophy of government deregulation and the fact that the world is split between the United States and Europe on the one hand, and the global majority on the other. And what we're talking about today is what I've been talking about with Kinchi's group for the last few years. The split is not only de-dollarization, it's not only about international trade, it's not only about industrial socialism versus finance capitalism, it's about global warming as one of the most immediate dimensions of this split between the West, the 15% of the population in the US and Europe, and the 85% of the world that is affected and victimized by the global warming that is being promoted by American foreign policy based on using oil and control of energy as the basis of its balance of payments and its ability to weaponize foreign trade to impose sanctions to prevent other countries from getting, say, Russian gas, to force them into buying US liquefied natural gas, to force them into the new Cold War by NATO against the rest of the world, not only in Ukraine against Russia, but now in the Pacific against China. You're having the increasing danger of military war added to the danger of just plain global warming from all of the civilian uses and misuses that we've been talking about.
Thank you, Michael. I might, just to let you catch up with a little bit more time, I might ask you a question, and though it might be a question that you're not able to really answer, but you've said that really to address global warming and ecological problems, the rest of the world really needs to isolate the United States and Europe. Do you think that it's going to be possible, or might it be possible, for the rest of the world to do this in time to prevent an ecological or civilizational catastrophe? Is it possible to actually isolate the West in time?
Well, we're in a catastrophe already. So the answer is no, because it's already occurring, and it's going to get worse every year. This year and next year, it's probably going to peak because of the United States is threatening to vastly increase war. Donald Trump has now said, we're preparing for atomic war. We are ready for atomic war. We have withdrawn from all of the international arms reduction agreements. There's members of the U.S. military say that the United States has now lost its military lead in missiles, and especially in missiles, aircraft, and other war, that as we lose our lead, we will get weaker and weaker in our ability to blow up the world and destroy civilization. And there's no better time to do it than now. They said, don't wait till later. Use the atomic war now. Wipe out Asia, wipe out Russia, wipe out China, blow, and of course, China and Russia will automatically retaliate against North America, wipe out the Northern Hemisphere. And Donald Trump says, this will make me the most famous man in history. I'm the man that ended civilization. I'm as important as Jesus Christ. I will go to, when there is a revival of history, presumably in the Southern Hemisphere, my name will be at the head of it all, because I'm the person who dropped the bomb and started the whole international warfare. You have a crazy person in the White House. He has surrounded himself with crazy military advisors. They want atomic war. That's why they've just withdrawn from all of the restraints on atomic war. When you talk about global warming, it's not only the oil industry and its carbon, it's now uranium and plutonium are going to be major contributors to global warming. So I think that's a danger that's increasing, but also the fact that the no progress can be made to prevent it until other countries decide to go it alone. Europe and the global majority countries are blocked by America's veto power over any international agreement. I could say that there won't be a solution to global warming until an alternative to the United Nations is created all over again. The United Nations, as we knew it from 1945 on, is dead. And I mentioned before that Annalena Baerbock has had the advocacy of war, military, the great fight against the environment. That's why they call themselves the Greens, so that they can pretend to be pro-environment when actually they're the leading destroyers of the environment by their war. The rest of the world has to realize that this problem is so important that it requires a political restructuring, not only of the United Nations, but of the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund. It requires a whole set of international organizations that isolate the United States and its European satellites and any Asian countries, in case Japan and Korea and the Philippines try to remain loyal to the United States instead of to the rest of humanity. The United States and its satellites have to be isolated in order to cure the global warming problem. So the global warming solution is not only technological, it's not only a tax policy and a regulatory policy, it's a political restructuring of the entire world in order to deal with this problem.
And we might move to Pedro again. And Pedro, maybe I might put the same question to you that I just put to Michael. Do you think that the global environmental challenges can be addressed in time? And what optimism do you have? And do you think that what are the broader international requirements for addressing it? And maybe you can address some of Michael's points as you see appropriate. Over to you, Pedro.
Thank you. Well, Michael said this is a matter of power. This is a matter of might. So what's first, the egg or the chicken? So how can you obtain power? How can you have the correlation of forces that can allow you to have a road towards a sustainability path? And that is precisely the situation. You know, Dante said the road to hell is paved by good wishes. So we need to create a theory. We need to create the operative efficacy in order to change the correlation of forces at the local, at the communal level. And the wonderful exposition of what is going on in Venezuela gave us a lot of how can I say, impressions of the very wide range of possibilities of social initiatives that could deploy precisely the conditions at the local level, at the communal level, but also the subnational level, the national level, the regional level, at the international level. How to do it? Right now, the headquarters of the evil agenda, this agenda of war, this agenda of furthering the climate crisis, is given by the dynamics of speculative capital.
Yes.
It is very important to distinguish this, because it's not capital as itself. No, you know, oh, because all capital is terrible. This is imperialism. This is exploitation. And more so, this is humankind, you know? A lot of ecologist movements and environmental movements and a lot of intellectuals are very, very adamant to say, oh, humankind is a plague, is the pestilence. No. 8 billion human beings have to thrive in this world in another conditions. And that is precisely what we need to create. Which are the conditions of sustainability of those experiences in Venezuela? Which are the kind of conditions of sustainability of this foundational insurrection in the Sahel? The heterodox economic policies in Ghana, for example, are creating a lot of hope about the alternative ways to dealing with macroeconomics, with destabilization, etc. But the problem is, how long can they still with this type of policies? No. So you need to create the conditions for doing that. At the local level, it is important. Again, I'm again insisting what I've been saying for 25 years. We need to create the conditions for a new financial architecture. At the local level, at the communal level, we need to create the conditions for for organizing the savings of the people, the efforts of the people, even if they are not monetized. Even if they are not transforming currency, even if they are not transforming values in economic values, we need to create, as Michael showed us in his explorations of the Sumerian past. We need to create ledgers in order to have the register and the balance of the efforts of the people in terms of equivalence or non-equivalent transactions. The exchange of the people, of the efforts of the people, the deployment of social energy that has been totally crippled by the system, has been not only crippled in terms of unemployment, but also in terms of frustration, in terms of boringness, in terms of depression, not economic depression, individual depression. We need to motivate the energy of the people around other type of goals related to the neighbor, related to the construction of a communal tissue at the level of the territory, but also applying the new tools of the technologies of information and communication, we can create another type of identities, another type of collective efforts through thematic endeavors. We could have different type of task forces at the international level, and the Global University for Sustainability could be one of the matrices for this assignation of tasks at the global level, working each one in its own environment in order to produce specific items, specific inputs for this diplomacy of the people. So we have to be absolutely certain that it is impossible for the elites, for the oligarchies, to come out with a different agenda. It's only the popular mobilization, it's only the social mobilization, it's only the canalization of this social energy in terms of real impact, not only at the level of the foundational insurrection, but also in terms of the constituent insurrection. Because if we cannot have institutionalized, if you cannot institute this in terms of new habits, in terms of new human relationships, this is only good wishes. And good wishes are the pavement to the road to the hell. For example, in the case of Ecuador, under the banners, the most noble banners of ecology and climate change, we have a plebiscite, we have a popular election voting for precluding the exploitation of oil. The most important reserves of oil of Ecuador were banned from exploitation in order to contribute to humanity. So when the correlation of forces went to the neoliberal right, that created the conditions for the desperate solution of compensating this lack of devices, this lack of dollars, with mining. And that's terrible. You know, we need to be very, very responsible in terms of the solutions. Right now, under the banners, under the most noble banners of ecology and even reduction of the external debt, several plans promoted by ecologist movements have been deployed in Latin America with this green capitalism, with, for example, the blue bonds. The Galapagos Island sovereignty has been already sold. Ecuador has no jurisdiction anymore over the Galapagos Island. And with the same type of mechanisms with the green bonds, they are going to sell also the sovereignty of the Ecuadorian Amazonia. And then they are going to expand this initiative for all the tropical forest in South America. The Orinoco Basin, the Amazonia Basin, and the Paraná and Plata Basin. This long ago ambition of Western imperialism has been already achieved under the banners of ecology and external debt reduction. So again, we need to create the conditions. For example, in the case of Venezuela, we need to transform the macroeconomic conditions of Venezuela's initiatives, anti-capitalist, non-capitalist initiatives at the local level. The Cuban experiences in the same way. What can be having in Nicaragua, in Bolivia, countries in which you have the political conditions to do that. We need to create the conditions for macroeconomic sustainability. This is impossible if we continue under the regime of international reserves that prevent us to use the resources in order to create infrastructure, to promote social programs, to create new productive capabilities. It's impossible. Peru, for example, have 80% of the Ecuadorian GDP as international reserves. They cannot use this in order to have hospitals and schools and roads and ports and airports and refineries, etc., etc., etc. In order to have sustainability in the Ghana and the Sahel insurrection, you need to have another system of reserves, another system of exchange, another system of regional financing of development, and we need to create these conditions in articulated and congruent way, level by level, going from the subnational level to the national level to the regional level and the international level. Great news to have the BRICS working in this type of issues, but if the new development bank make the most beautiful project financed in dollars, you are indebted in dollars. So you need to reinforce the conditions of monopoly, of global monopoly of the dollar on transactionality, on liquidity, on credit, on international reserves, on the internal banking system, the dependency on the IMF, the dependency on the World Bank, and the dependency on the Anglo-American and the Zionist Anglo-American network of tax havens in order to pay the debt in dollars. You need to produce a surplus in dollars in order to pay the debt. So again, of good wishes is paved the road to hell. When I mention, of course, this is going to take a lot of time, and I'm going to finish right now, but the gradient of resilience that we have in this scenario of crisis is very important. It's very important because that makes you clear which is the road of least resistance from the empire with the largest impact in a systemic horizon. So you have a very low resistance in terms of monetary transactions. China has transformed the basket of currencies of its international trade from 90% domination of dollar to 42% in a couple of years. But at the same time, the possibilities of the immediate possibilities, we are not talking about decades now, the immediate possibilities of a new financial implosion in the rotten Anglo-American financial system is going to have a tsunami proportion all around the world, including China, including the global south, including the Sahel, including Venezuela, including Ecuador. And this is immediate. More so, we don't have a long-term time frame. You have very short, very immediate threats in terms of the financial stability of the Western financial system, but also you have very immediate challenges in terms of the energy component of the productive forces based upon hydrocarbons. Right now, we have a very rapid, very immediate precipitation of the energy return on input in terms of oil exploitation that had created the peak oil is not a matter of absolute scarcity. It's a matter of rents, of classical rents in the sense of Smith, Ricardo, and Marx. You have a span of a couple of years in which the schistose exploitation of gas and oil in the United States is going to be over.
There's a slight change in the schedule. Just briefly, we're going to have somebody who's just arrived here today from Shanghai, Luis Henrique Gomez Demura, a coordinator at the International Association for Popular Cooperation of Latin America, and he's from Brazil. and will provide a perspective from Brazil.
So I'm thinking not talking about only Brazil, but how we are understanding this time as MST. And I would like to take 2 points as the main points. The first is the peasant role. When we are talking about everything that we already talked about ecology, about food sovereignty, about the projects, the developed projects. And the second point is about exactly national projects, how we can build this in the Global South. And I'm talking about Global South because I know this is not so solid concept, but it's the best that we have nowadays. So first of all, when I would like thank you, Hernan, for give a little bit large, but this is because it's complex, the reality in Venezuela, but very important explanation, presentation about the communities. But when we look the Cuban process and also the Venezuelan process, the peasant really took the real role in the society during the crisis. In Cuba, in the special period, and in Venezuela with the sanctions. Without the sanctions, I think even the communas will not have so fast support, but not because the government, but because the contradictions, the structural contradictions. So I think this is a big challenge for the left in the world, and mainly in the Global South. What is the peasant role, not as a secondary player in the revolutionary process, but for the Global South, in some countries, even the principal player. For instance, when we are talking about Africa, we don't have good data about Africa, but we have between 600 million to 900 million peasants in that continent. So you cannot think about the development in Africa if you are not thinking about the peasants. This is why I think when we are looking in China, we cannot look China as a model for the whole world. And even the Chinese leaders never say that. They every time say, this is a Chinese socialist. This is because it's in their society. When we are building our socialism, we need to find the basis of our socialism. But even in with these principles, I think we can take the example from China when we are talking about the peasants. Because China is a country with 240 million units, peasant units. So it's a huge. Rural revitalization is one of the keys of the modernization of China, but it's not alone. Thinking about rural revitalization, we saw it a little bit today during the afternoon. It's also thinking about ecological civilization. It's also thinking about infrastructure, the trains, the internet, water, house, and also even it's talking about what they are calling new quality of productive force, and especially AI. Because AI, artificial intelligence, it's a challenge for us. I don't think we can avoid AI. We need build a people's perspective about AI. it is possible, because the Communist Party of China is understanding that AI is like this, can be like the electricity or can be like the steam machine, the same level for the development of the society. So if it is true, discussing who is the owner of this and how this machine, because it's a machine, it's not to change the human capacity, it's to enhance the human capacity. How this machine will be developed, it's very important. And I think we should discuss it. How we can do it in our countries in the global south, because we are not China. We are not the socialist countries. So we believe, first of all, we need accumulate force. This is why I presented during the morning this experience with Baobab. It's not a revolutionary way. It's working with policies, working with our countries when they connect with China. But when we are struggle to have better policies, to straighten the capacity of the peasants, to straighten the capacity of the working class, to straighten the capacity of the women organizations, we are building better forces conditions to, second, build a new national project for our countries. If we are not talking about national projects, it means how we can think about our nations from the people's perspective. If you are not thinking about it, if you are thinking the development is like autarkic, some communities can do it by themselves, we will never solve our problem in the global south. And third, is how we can connect these national projects in an internationalist perspective. Again, and we had very good discussions about, for instance, BRICS. I think, again, BRICS, it's important, but let's talk frankly. BRICS even doesn't have a secretariat. It's only submits each year. They make agreements, but it's not strong enough. So which kind of new mechanism we can build for the global south? Even NDB, as the comrade from Ecuador was saying, it's not easy, because President Dilma Rousseff is there. To make another kind, this is true. All the finance system in the world is a slavery, is subordinate to IMF. If you try building a bank without the dollar control, you need some country to support it. Who will do it for NDB? China? India? Brazil? South Africa? Because it should be a consensus, must be a consensus. And I don't think they have this kind of consensus. So this is a challenge. It's not a problem of President Dilma. It's not a problem only the NDB. It's because we are in this time of the world that multipolarity, it's a must, but we don't know how we can really do it nowadays. This is why also Trump is doing what he's doing. Because it's still the imperial, it's in decadent time, but they still have the strength to push the countries, to humiliate the countries, the leaders. So this is why, from our point of view, when I'm talking as MSC, we can talk about the camps, We can talk about the settlements, and we understand the agroecology, the food sovereignty. It's a base of this new agrarian reform, but we also think it's not possible make this struggle alone, only as MST. So this is why we pay a lot of attention to try build an united front in Brazil. And not only build a united front in Brazil, to support, to promote ALBA, to support, to promote other people's organizations around the world. Because only with this, I think with this framework, we can really build the ecological solutions. We can really build a new kind of development theory, a new development theory for the Global South. We can build a new human relations, a new kind of human relations based in the feminism, in the anti-racism, in the respect of the people's sovereignty. So only with this kind of arrangement, we think it's possible to skip, as was very good expressed before, skip this lack of trap, like the green capitalism or others traps that the capitalism and the imperialism it's put in our way. So that's...
Thank you, Lewis. And Hanan, I'll ask you to come up again and make any comments that you would like to make on Michael's, Pedro's or Lewis's comments, or any others that you would like to make.
First of all, I think that we have a lot of coincidences on the things that we have been discussing tonight. I think that we all agree with Michael in his worries and the things that he plans. I think that what we are facing right now is not just a global warmth, it's a crisis of the system, of the mode of reproduction of humanity, but especially we have the people that created and protect and promote this crisis are right now leading the world, are right now governing. So I don't know, I think that we all think that Trump is a crazy man, but not exactly improvising. I think that he's an expression of the elites on the global north. I think that it's expression of what the West needs at the moment. It's a system that demands dispossession on mass of population in order to guarantee the reproduction of a way of life, not even for the West in a white aspect. It's more like a way of living for 1% of population. So I think this model of reproduction is putting in risk the future. So I think that maybe taking some of the last words of Saref, I think that we have the necessity to build international alliance. As Claudia mentioned yesterday, it's about the necessity to build a bridge or strengthen the bridge that we need to build in the global south in order to face the common threats that we have right now, the common risk. I think that what we have in risk right now is the future of humanity, the future of the life on the planet. And in that sense, I think that we need to strengthen alliances for saving life in the planet. And I think on 5 issues that has been mentioned tonight, and I want to emphasize them. One of them is that we have the necessity to build this unity, this alliance, in order to visualize and put in the center that we have, what we are facing now is a model of death, which is 1% of population of the world, sustain order under the disposition of the rest of the world, which are basically a must in the global south. The second issue is about the necessity of criticizing the global north, to criticizing the Western model. That's something that we need to do, because in our regions, we used to be on our national agendas, and that's, of course, that makes sense. But we need to build alliances of the global south in order to criticize these global north, these Western elites as common enemies, and that has to be our common standards, our common flags to fight against them, to visualize them, and to criticize them. Because actually I think that in the latest years, in the beginning of this century, I think that we have more unity against the enemy, and during the last 10 years, it has been weakening this kind of alliances against the common enemies. The third issue is about, I also agreed with Saref in the necessity to dispute a multipolar future, a new model of society from the global south. We need to politicize, we need to discuss politically this possibility of building of the BRICS, for example, because it could be an agenda that could reproduce, as a lot of people mentioned before, in politics, there is no emptiness. So if we don't have an agenda, BRICS will reproduce the same model of society that we have, and we need to politicize that process. The first issue is about the necessity in this international alliance in Venezuela, we talk about the necessity to reunify the struggles. It's important that also the sectorials, both the sectorial fights, struggles, and the territorial ones need to be part of our diversity in order to unify, because we have the risk to segregate and to separate the struggles by the sectorial agendas or even the territorial agendas. We need to unify under common standards. We need to repolarize, we need to polarize this unity against our enemies and under our common flags. And we need to repolitize this process, because in the last years, we have been losing some common agendas that could be very important. For example, talking about anti-imperialism is something that we need to put in the center of discussion. The necessity for fight against colonialism. These are common agendas, common flags that we need to put together. From Venezuela, we think that in the last time, what we're living is some kind of new agenda, new fascist agenda in the world, and we need to put that in discussion. And the fifth issue, which maybe is more related to something that Pedro mentioned, I think what we need to discuss, what is a new agenda from the global south for this era that we're living right now. For example, and that agenda could have different types of issues that have been mentioned here tonight and during these years and during these days. Like, for example, a new financial architecture, defining a new economic agenda. What should be from the global south? At last, I think that thinking in what Saref mentioned about the role of the peasants, I think that we need to put one of the key issues of this alliance is that it has to be centered in the role of peasants, because actually peasants are the ones who support life in our planet in the main front. I mean, the food, it's relying on the people from the countryside which actually each more time is less of the population. In Latin America, for example, 80% of population live on the cities, live in the urban. So most of the people lives put all the pressure, all his weight under the backs of the countryside, of the rural workers. So I think that's important to put the peasants in the center. But also we need to strengthen our agendas of mobilization and articulation of the urban masses, because as I said, most of the population is in the urban level. Most of them are informalized, most of them dispossessed, most of them without an access to work, most of them with different kind of situations and struggles, with a reconfiguration of the world of work. But it's a key issue to discuss and to work on the urban land, as we think that we need, as I think that we need to put the peasant struggles in the center to protect and to promote. We also need to promote the alliances in the urban land in order to rebuild, mobilize, organize movement sector on the urban land. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Hernan. Now back to Michael. Michael, we've got a question from Zoom, which I'll ask you, and I'll also ask you to make your final points as well, your conclusion. You've got 10 minutes in which to do it. So the question on Zoom is, Professor Hudson posed a poignant question. Does he mean we should give up illusions and be ready to struggle? So does he mean we should give up illusions and be ready to struggle? So over to you, Michael.
The question is, how do you struggle? The previous speakers have mentioned people. What can the people do? Well, all we have attending this conference are people. So I can't say that people can't do anything, but the problem is what the people do works in a democracy, but we're not living in democracies, either in the United States or in much of the global South. We're living in oligarchies, and many of the global South countries are dominated by client oligarchies of the United States. So it's not simply a national problem, it's a domestic class problem as well. And I think your speakers have made this pretty clear in what they've said. So the question is, what can people do? Well, all the people at this conference can do is try to formulate what the problem is as clearly as possible. I've tried to do it as succinctly as possible, in as few words as possible. It has to be compressed into not a long manifesto, but just basically into something as brief as I've tried to put it in. The problem is that democracy, that the people don't control the government. And if you don't control the government, what is it that you can do, even if you describe the problems that exist as we've talked about today? So you have throughout Europe, for instance, the polls show that the people don't support the government. The Germans don't support the pro-war NATO government of Mr. Merz. The French don't support the pro-war, pro-American government of Macron. The people of England and Britain do not support the pro-US, pro-war government of Mr. Starmer and the whole Tony Blair corruption of the Labour Party. And in the United States, the polls show that the people do not support America's support of the genocide in Gaza. They don't support the wholesale racism of arresting Latino speakers and deporting American citizens if they're Latino and not white and not considered to be white. So despite the fact that the people are against what's happening, what can they do? That's a political problem that goes way beyond the ability of this conference to address, but you have to realize that we're in a not only in an international war by the United States and Europe against the global majority, we're in a domestic class war in every country by the oligarchy supporting the war, supporting continued global warming, continued trying to shift the costs of global warming onto the wage-earning population as a whole, squeezing them, making the poor and the lowest income classes and the industrial producers suffer in order to serve the interests of a very selfish, narrow 1% oligarchy at the top of the pyramid. So any attempt to change a part of this system, such as changing, addressing the global warming problem, the environmental problem, the plastics problem, the war problem, has to be dealt with as on a system-changing basis. And when you realize that the current system was all put in place by U.S. diplomats in one quantum leap in 1944 and 1945, that has shaped the last 80 years order, you need a similar revolution. And it probably does take a revolution. It took a revolution in China to do what it's done. There's a lot of talk in Europe right now about, well, Germany and Europe is much more dependent on China now. We want reverse technology. We want China to transfer its technology to Europe. This is a blind spot that the Europeans and the Americans and the NATO countries have. The problem's not a technological one. It's an economic system. The reason you need to change the political economic system into a real democracy that requires a strong state, not a dismantling of government, to shift the power of planning to the financial centers. No matter what the criticism of the strong state may be, planning by a government is less destructive than planning by Wall Street, the City of London, the Bank of Paris, the Bank of Japan, by the financial centers. And that's really the key. Who is going to shape the markets in which trade and investment and money take place? Will it be the financial oligarchy that's emerged, or will it be a state controlled by the population at large, in conjunction with a strong a government strong enough to prevent an oligarchy from emerging? That's the question for our time, and it goes beyond the scope of this conference. And all we could do is discuss this one dimension of the scale of this problem, the dimension of the environment.
Thank you, Michael. And now if I could ask Pedro to provide your concluding comments and aim to keep them within 3 to 5 minutes.
Thank you. About what is easy, for sure, everything that serves the interest of the warmongering speculative elite, this degraded option of civilization, is going to be very easy. When the moderator introduced me, affiliation to some institution, that was wrong, because I was prevented for being part of any institution anymore in my country. So everything has a cost. When I mentioned, do you remember, Kimchi, 15, 20 years ago, when I denounced the use of the SWIFT, the use of the international reserve system, the use of the system of payments, the use of the balance of payment mechanisms, the use of the international trade mechanisms as an instrument of war. Do you remember that even among the gurus of the left, you have a roaring of, oh, that is technocratical nonsense, you know? Everybody says, oh, it's very difficult to force the IMF to issue special drawing rights, this digital currency that the IMF possess but do not like to use because they cannot impose conditionalities. When we propose this to the international level, they say, okay, this is very, very, very bourgeois. This is part of the system, you know. But along of this, they avoid to support a claim that $30 billion of special drawing rights from the advanced countries that do not need the international devices could be devoted to the FAO, the NGO, the United Nations Organization for Food and Alimentation, to prevent famine. And they say, no, anything less than an agrarian revolution is reformism. So in 2008 and 2009, we passed from 800 to 1,200 million people suffering different degrees of famine. And this is a task that could be imposed right now. We can launch right now a popular diplomacy in order to solve the problem of, in terms of assistantialism, it doesn't matter, in order to solve the problem of famine in the world with a very narrow budget of only $30–40 billion. Those are figures calculated by the same staff, even Jacques Diouf, that was the director of the FAO at that time. So again, what is easy and what is difficult is a very relative question. You know, and even if in your comfort zone, this is very easy, everything is going to be very difficult in a short time. More so, it's going to be bloody difficult in a very short time. Merchants of death are looking forward for new markets for weapons. And the arms race is coming to South America, is coming to Latin America. As the arc of conflict in Southwest Asia is saturated right now. They need new markets, very profitable markets for death. And that is the only solution that the Zionist Anglo-American oligarchy can present to all the peoples in the world, especially in his backyard. The left and the right in Latin America should be aware of this. We are facing immediate challenges because of the dynamics of speculative capital, because of the dynamics of over-indebtment, because of the dynamic of financial derivatives, because of the dynamic of tax havens, because of the dynamics of lack of industrialization in the north, in the western north. That means the lack of industry and the disturbances of the tariff war by Trump in the United States, but also the collapse of continental Europe. And this is going to affect immediately the macroeconomic and the productive, the chains of value of Latin America, immediately. Beyond the scruples on the careful policies of the right and the left in Latin America, and the same is going to happen all around the world. We need to have economic imagination in order to have efficient ways to support a sustainable economy, a sustainable decision, political decision right now. And that requires a lot of scientific effort. This is not of opinions. We have to solve concrete problems that are arising right now in every one of our horizons in a matter of months. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pedro. And Hanan, could you make your final comments, please?
I think that basically of the things that we must need to unify at this moment is to build strong alliances around the necessity to defend our sovereignty. In order to defend life in our world, we need to dispute and generate capacities to defend our sovereignty. In order to defend our sovereignty, we need to strengthen our alternative dynamics in the territories. On the one hand, we need to visualize these alternatives that we are building. Some of them has been put in common here in these last days, but also to see from them which are the common trends that could be part of an agenda that we need to promote and dispute as an alternative agenda to this global crisis that we're facing right now. And of course, I think that it's important, it's critical to put in the center our common enemies, the elites and that promote and defend the Western mode, the Western model. That's a common issue that has to unify us at this point. It's important to face and to identify, as well as we identified how those elites promote the genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza. It's the same thing that we need to face in the different fronts. Which one are the agendas or the elites against our peoples, our life? I think that's one of the most important key issues. And of course, on the same hand, we need to strengthen our alliances in order to visualize alternatives. Thinking in the topic of this discussion, the necessity to see which one are the trends of green and sustainable and positive alternative model for our society. The last issue, thinking about the experience in Venezuela, is that it's impossible to defend sovereignty if we don't have the will to fight to defend our sovereignty and our independence. And it's not possible to sustain and defend sovereignty if we don't escalate at the same time both political and economic forms of and dynamics of reproduction. It's not possible to face capitalism. It's not possible to face the Western model of production and reproduction if we don't build an alternative. And that's maybe one of the main challenges that we have from the movements of the Global South, if we really need to dispute and defend our sovereignty, our independence, our possibility to fight for life, to defend life in the Global South. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hanan. And I would like to thank again all of our speakers tonight, Michael, Pedro, Hanan, and Luis. So thank you all very much for your contributions, and a round of applause.